Oh, right. Welcome to the program. Charles Moscowitz here. Michael D. Shaw is my guest at our new time of 12 noon Eastern Standard Time, Monday through
Well,
Friday,
Eastern Daylight, but okay.
Eastern Daylight. That's true. So, Mike, it's the 250th anniversary. Very inspiring festivities, I thought. President Trump delivered, I think, one of the best speeches of his presidency. He really laid out the difference between the American approach and the far left, and did so in his usual blunt terms. And yet, you had at the same time Mamdani in New York sitting at George Washington's desk, ironically, and delivering just a typical old anti-American screed. Looking at everything as a glass half empty, or I think in the far left case, it's a glass less than half empty. Sure, this country has problems in the past and still does because human nature is not perfect. But I mean, just this negative look at everything, bad without any kind of answer at all as to what to do about it. We're just supposed to feel lousy. It's kind of it's the grievance agenda
Well,
that,
it was sort of ironic, right? That some guy that's been in the country for a relatively short period of time and has yet achieved fairly high status as the mayor of our largest city
yeah.
through whatever misadventure that may have happened. But it unfortunately is kind of typical. I mean, I don't know whether this extreme negativity really jump started with the likes of Howard Zinn and this kind of thing, but I think maybe, I mean, maybe I'm wrong about this, but maybe it's getting kind of old, like the girl boss tropes in the movies.
Mhm.
They tried the same crap. Supergirl was a huge, huge flop because people are tired of the same garbage. And as we've said so many times on this show, the left doesn't really have anything. So they have to trot out the same old message, albeit from different quarters. And the Democrats can watch their party being hijacked by these left-wing types, and they're not doing anything about it. I mean, it's like they're going to drown in their own mess here. Fine
Well,
with
I mean,
me.
I hope so. I mean, I certainly, you and I, and most people that we certainly amongst, I think the majority are sick and tired of this sort of rhetoric. But at the same time, it can't be dismissed. I mean, I wonder if they are. I mean, if this is all they have, we can all kind of scoff and be relieved. But I mean, look at they still hold up the high ground in terms of the media and our institutions, and certainly academia and everywhere, other places which have resulted in this really far left phenomena. And
Well, maybe the conversation should be, how do we break that stranglehold? I mean, you're absolutely right. Academia, we can say it's a lost cause, but the problem is it's a big institution and it's been corrupted. Really, to be honest, it started right after World War II, I think. And yeah, in my generation in the 60s, it took off in earnest. But maybe the way that gets broken is it goes up against reality. If you talk to kids now, and it's not with them 100%, well, I got to go to college, because the question is, do you really want to go into debt so you can get a degree in lesbian basket weaving? What are you going to do with that? How is that going to help you economically? And there seems to be an upswing in the trade schools.
I think that a lot of those really radical subjects are shrinking, the atrophying, the so-called studies, and also sociology. Now, BU has just decertified sociology, and BU is a pretty liberal
Really?
college.
How
Yeah, I
did
mean,
that happen? There
it,
just weren't enough people signing up?
yeah, or you can sign up as a kind of a elective. I mean, there's no longer a major of sociology, and it's
Wow.
happening in other colleges around the country. It's just the whole thing is shrinking, not because sociology is a bad field. It's not. I like sociology. I'm studying it, but it's become so dominated by the radical left, probably always was, that it's like it doesn't really have any functionality. It's devoid of any reality in terms of analyzing what sociology should do, which is analyze society, analyze trends, analyze demographics and why they are who they are. That's what it's supposed to do. That's what C. Wright Mills did in his book, The Sociological Imagination and the Power Elite. It's slipped a lot since then. It's
Well,
not.
when was his
His book was
1950?
published in the early '60s, late '50s.
Okay.
So, and then he passed away at a very young age. And he was a man of the left, but I think by today's standards, he'd be, not exactly, and I think he was intellectually vigorous enough that he would have changed. But now it's all critical theory, and it's destructive, it's divisive, it runs completely contrary to American notions that are actually helpful toward minorities and that are helpful toward people who are economically disadvantaged. And they have nothing to go on. Unfortunately for me, I mean, I got a big earful the other day of MSNBC. I was sort of in my car and I had to listen to this.
Ladies and gentlemen, Chuck does this so you don't have to.
I had someone in my car was listening to MSNBC on the live stream. Actually, it was pre-recorded, and it was so negative in that the only thing that they're working now is that Trump made $2.3 something billion since he's been in the White House. Now he's made the money mainly because he has good investments and they've gone up, but they're like, look at they're trying to imply, and they're comparing this to Hunter Biden. Can you imagine the nerve? I mean, the Biden crime family made money from selling his office for decades. He's not the only one, but he did it in a big way, and selling access to his power so that he would sponsor legislation that helped the company. So especially foreign nations, including enemies like China, where he would get, they would get a big payoff to the big guy, as Hunter Biden put in his.
Well, he was flagrant about it.
He was, and even Obama didn't like it, but he was doing these deals like with Burisma, and the Burisma's investigating, the Ukrainians were investigating Burisma, so he got them to fire the prosecutor, the special prosecutors, because they were giving him a lot of money. And this is all, of course, in the Hunter Biden laptop. And to compare that to Trump, I mean, look at his sons are making. First of all, when they can't come out and say that anymore because they know that Trump will sue them, as he has done now. When they lie publicly and they slander, they now are going to be held accountable. And when he does sue them, he's doing it for all of us, because they have lied to such a degree that somebody has to take them on and hold them accountable and make them pay a price for that, financial price, which they did in certain cases, particularly the one with George Stephanopoulos. And but yet they imply it. They go right to the edge without actually stating it for that reason. So at least there's some restraint. But then they went on after those implications to say, look at this. He's making all this money when you have some poor schnook who only earns a little, they can't afford to put more food on the table. Oh, this is the Bernie Sanders kind of stuff. When, in other words, it's an attack on capitalism. It's an attack on success.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how much has changed? That famous line from Will Rogers back in the 1930s, that America is the only nation where people will drive to the poorhouse in an automobile. And apparently America is the only nation where all these starving people are obese.
You know,
And
it's sort of like in the 1930s when they made the movie The Grapes of Wrath, which was hugely popular. It showed people from Oklahoma and Arkansas, you know, the Okies, so-called, going out to California during the height of the Depression and the Dust Bowl. And it was supposed to show how awful America is and how people are starving and it's so poor. But people in foreign countries, like in Russia, for example, seeing that movie, they're like, wow, look at the car that they're driving.
yeah.
Look at they have nice clothes. You know, they've got a lunch bag box with food in it. I mean, they're like looking at this thing and it's like,
That's right. Well, even at this stage, which I may have mentioned last week, and I've heard this a lot, that the Europeans are coming over for the World Cup. And the thing they're astounded by is that air conditioning is everywhere.
Oh, I mean, you know, they had films. I mean, well, actually, Bill Maher did a piece on this. They showed them like going to Walmart, and they're like, "Look at this! Is incredible! It's like Disneyland. This is like you could get so many different brands of toothpaste, or you know, they're looking at the aisles and they're going down. They're like amazed by this. I mean, things that we take for granted here, things that actually are more popular with lower income people. You know, so yeah, I mean, the Europeans are like here, very pro-America. I think that whole narrative has completely backfired on them.
Well, there was a great video that went viral. You may have seen it. Some German guy was actually in Boston.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the narrative specifically was. I forget, something to the effect he was lost, or I mean, whatever. He was somewhere around the stadium. He couldn't find his bearings. And he was amazed how people helped him. And he said, gee, I was told I should be afraid coming over here. There's all this crime. I'm going to get mugged immediately. And he said, no, I love America. This is great. And it's an eye-opener for these poor Euro schmucks that have lived this way. Or as my oldest son famously said, I think he was in his late 30s or early 40s, whatever it was. And he had made numerous trips to Europe. And then it dawned on him in one trip, said, what the hell is this? These guys are in their 50s living like college students in these little tiny apartments. And their main thing in life is, gee, they're going to get some overpriced meal somewhere. Then they go back to their little hovel apartment, pay outrageously high taxes. And I think maybe some of this is sinking in. Look, it's a slow process. And you're talking about the sociology department disappearing at BU. If you look at popular culture, these movies are getting destroyed given the communication capabilities of the internet, to the point the studio is saying, no, it's review bombing and it's a small minority that are doing this, which is crap. I mean, no one's going to it. People are fighting back. Unfortunately, it's going to take a while, but I think the movement is in the right direction.
Yeah, and also I think there are a couple of more patriotic movies that are like, I think Young Washington. I haven't seen it, but I've heard that it's quite good. And also this Citizen Vigilante. I don't know if you know anything about that.
Oh yeah.
It's apparently
that was condemned, and I believe it's banned in the UK.
Well, I think that I haven't seen it, so I don't know, but I understand that
I saw it. I mean, basically, what happens is that Army Hammer plays this ex-military guy who becomes this vigilante. And he goes after, specifically, there's, and this is based on an actual case, by the way, in Hamburg, where a group of these immigrants, I think 6 of them, gang raped some German girl.
Right.
Got off with a suspended sentence. So, true case. Yeah. So, Army Hammer goes out and he tracks these guys down and he kills them and does the vigilante thing. The production value isn't very good. but Army Hammer's in it. And by the way, he got screwed. I mean, the story of what happened to him is
What happened to
insane.
that? I know that he was
Okay.
accused of some improprieties. I mean,
No, he was.
I don't know what's the deal.
A former girlfriend tweeted something about, oh yeah, Army Hammer's a cannibal.
Right.
Okay, so he replies in some sarcastic way, oh, absolutely, I'm a total cannibal. And I guess people took it seriously.
Yeah. I mean, did he run afoul of the sort of the elite establishment or something?
I think it was really more at the height of believe all women.
Oh, okay. He got caught up in the Me Too.
Me Too.
Which reminds me very briefly, as is typical, during the height of that, Hillary Clinton, of all people, can you imagine enabling all those women that Bill Clinton raped? She put up on her site, believe women. And she was so roasted that she immediately pulled it off.
Yeah.
It was like so like tone deaf. Hello, what about Paula Jones? Believe all women? What about Kathleen Willey, who Clinton raped while in the Oval Office? I mean, anyway, but to go back,
what was interesting about that? You're exactly right. It was you can't imagine a more tone deaf thing to do. And she's been always portrayed as she's brilliant, but she's an idiot. I mean, seriously, how stupid do you have to be to do something like that?
Well, they all tried to it's typical of the left. I mean, I remember I don't want to bring up an issue, but my former co-host, Dr. Patrick O'Heffernan, good man, we didn't part company on the best of terms, but he would insinuate himself into every liberal cause. Yeah. Whoever it was, whatever you brought up. Oh, yes, I was there. I was standing right next to Martin Luther King, and he has a picture. You could see that maybe he was in a crowd near King at a speech. King had no idea who he was, but there he is, Anyways, the most notorious here locally for that is Elizabeth Warren. She chimed in on the Me Too by saying, oh, yes, I had a boss who chased me around the desk and tried to pin me up against the wall. Well, it turns out that this boss that she was talking about was a man in a wheelchair. He didn't chase anybody. And that when he died, she gave a glowing speech at his funeral years later. So, I mean, just, she'll drop, she signs up for everything under the sun. I mean, it's embarrassing. It's a national disgrace, what she does. But going back to, to what they have going, they've got the same old depressing, as you say, Howard Zinn, People's History of America, or anybody who reads that book. Yeah, there are some truths in there, but they're put in such a negative context. And he says nothing positive about the United States. It's as if the whole history, and the implication being that somehow we don't know this and that we're responsible for it, especially if we're not left-wingers. And it has poisoned the minds of a generation of young people. I mean, my daughter told me this, that she was assigned this when she was in high school, and that it was poisonous. Young people are reading this stuff and being very influenced by it.
Well, I mean, the question that comes to mind is, and I think I've talked to people about this. Within your daughter's class, let's say, were there students that were saying, "Wait a minute"?
There was a handful of them, and she was one of them. But but for the most part, they just either went along with it very radically, or they just sort of like, oh yeah, right, they just absorbed it, and they would take it all in because they didn't have the intellectual skills or literally the critical ability to think critically, to make a separation. And I've noticed that younger people, including my daughter, sometimes they will hear something uttered by a professor, or they'll read something in an article and they become very dogmatic about it. Oh, yeah, this is it. This is the way it is. Maybe that's something about how younger people's minds work. I don't know. I mean, I think I've been guilty of that, I suppose. It's kind of, confirmation bias, they call it in sociology, that it confirms something that you generally think by reinforcing it. So oh, yes, I'm all on board with that. This is me. And so there's some of that element. You work in these things over time, and eventually it just you build up a whole narrative, a whole infrastructure around it, and you take in stuff that agrees with it and tend to ignore stuff that doesn't.
Well, the first thing you learn in school is how to follow orders. So
Yes.
it stems from that. And, maybe I was some sort of an outlier that I've said this numerous times on the show, that I think I was 9 or 10 years old. I started noticing, based on whatever life experience I could have at that age, that a disproportionate number of these teachers seem to be misfits, based on my exposure to, people at that age. And it seemed to be around 20%. There was something wrong with these individuals. And ironically, my wife, who had retired a few years ago as a teacher, was very reluctant to go along with that, because you're in this environment and you don't want to really believe what's going on. As famously said by one of the most holy priests I ever encountered in my life, who finally, acknowledged, yeah, this crap is going on. But he said, honest to God, I never knew a priest personally that was doing this stuff.
Mm.
And that maybe you finally had to realize, yeah, there were some bad apples. Okay. So I think there's been a very pernicious influence in academia, but going all the way back to grammar school with these kids.
Oh, and I think that teachers now, it's a higher percentage that have been indoctrinated, and these are themselves were students who had been indoctrinated at a young age. I mean, I don't know if you just saw how the National Education NEA, which is a left-wing, very influential union that basically got Jimmy Carter to create the Department of Education. My dear friend, the late great Dr. Samuel Blumenfeld, wrote a book, classic book, NEA, Trojan Horse in American Education.
Right.
I could just hear him now with this release, this whistleblower. They're planning on impeaching Trump. They want to have him impeached, convicted, removed from office before the midterms. They're planning a big protest in Washington, to impeach Trump sometime before the midterms. I don't think they didn't want that to be public. It's been released, and they're approaching the Congressional Black Caucus to join them, with the idea that somehow Trump has done something to oppress Black people, which is a complete lie, of course.
Well, not only is it a complete lie, that the sad fact is that Barack Obama did zero for Black people. Nothing.
Oh,
you can't point to a single thing he did for Black people.
Yeah, whereas a lot for Black people. Oh, which is another. I was listening to NPR this morning, as you know, I had to, and they're covering this story. It just shows how typical this is, how vicious it is. That Michael Dell, the head of Dell Technologies and Computers, has earmarked something like I don't know how many billions of dollars, along with President Trump, working with the government, to ensure that every child born in the United States automatically gets $1,000 deposited into an account that is indexed to the stock market, and that when they reach the age of 18, they can then start to draw from that account for very specific things like college and
Right.
create a business, and that people in their family or whoever is allowed to contribute up to $5,000 a year into this account. Now, this is not only is this a step toward privatizing Social Security, but it's one of the most, if I could use the term, progressive things that's been done that I can remember for people of low income. Not all, and it accompanies the no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security for
Right.
lower income earners, people who earn less than 50,000 a year, and other moves that have actually done something to reduce poverty and create, what the left likes to call equity. Um, and their coverage of it is so negative that it's just they can't say anything good, and they're picking at the edges. Oh, it's only $1,000. That's not enough. Oh, and then they have an economist come in and say, well, at 8% interest, that means that by the time they turn 17, it'll only be $4,000. As if there's something, first of all, wrong with that. It's so snobby, so arrogant. And that this cap on $5,000 contributions, well, it should be more. I mean, in other words, yeah, you can criticize maybe, but so negative, the tone of it, and then not any kind of acknowledgement that this is actually a significant program that is put in place where there had been nothing before. It's a completely new idea. It goes with the Trump RX, which is reducing the cost of drugs to people. I'm taking, frankly, a drug right now that I'm saving many thousands of dollars because I got a coupon from Trump RX. I mean, these are things that are helping working people, and they won't either. They ignore it, or in the case of NPR today, they have no choice but to cover it. So they
Well,
do.
they cover it, but it points out to them that they really haven't done a damn thing.
Yeah,
That
and
it,
he's actually doing something rather than all this kind of garbage rhetoric, this soaring rhetoric that Obama and them, we're, I don't know, like Bernie Sanders, you get a place at the table for all
well,
people.
this is it. I mean, on the left, it's all rhetoric. I
Yeah,
mean, how far back do you want to go? What did Martin Luther King specifically actually do other than give speeches? At the
well,
same time, Thurgood Marshall was actually litigating stuff that created the advancements of rights for Black people. But yet, somehow, this big notion of giving these speeches, written by others, by the way, so it's all rhetoric. It always has been. It always will be. And all they could do, if you point that out, is attack you because they've got nothing. They never did have anything. And finally, after all these years, it's starting to become more obvious, I guess. So they're getting even more upset, just like the movie industry is viciously attacking their customers. I mean,
and
it's
also I would
unbelievable.
say that at least Martin Luther King gave lip service to, judging someone not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Something that was furthered by Thomas Sowell in his books, where he talked about, that the American approach is to judge accomplishment, not things like race, which is something, by the way, that I want to bring up two things. Firstly, there's a great quote, I can't find it right now, from Samuel Alito at the Supreme Court, where he bluntly and openly takes on this small clique of federal judges who are impeding President Trump's advancing agenda by noting that President Trump was elected constitutionally with a majority, and that they are deliberately and consciously trying to thwart the will of the electorate who put him in office by cooking up these false, rulings, saying, oh, you can't fire people in the executive branch, right? Or you have to, by law, you have to fund Planned Parenthood. Where the hell does it in the Constitution does it say that the taxpayer has to fund Planned Parenthood, or that you have to leave in place all that funding? The Department of Education, they get $420 billion a year, and yet education levels have dropped. What the hell are they doing with that money? I mean, it's crazy, but at least he's calling it out. And the second thing I want to ask about is, what about these? The left is now in an absolute frenzy over these so-called white nationalist guys who are marching on the 4th of July in Washington. They are masked. They look like Marines.
Patriot Front.
Patriot Front. They're all very fit looking. They look fit and trim. They look like Marines. And they're all masked. And they're orderly. They're marching quietly. They're not looting. They're not doing like they did after George Floyd's death, where they're looting black businesses and burning black neighborhoods and shooting black children. They're completely orderly, and they went on a bus apparently, and there was this young black girl on the bus. They got up, they let her sit down. There was nothing, but they're running this picture showing the black girl sitting on a chair, and then in front of her and behind her are these guys with their masks, and they're like going into a frenzy over this. Look at these people, and look, with the implication, of course, that they're Trump supporters. We don't really know who they are. I suspect that. I wonder if this Southern Poverty Law Center is up to, back in business again. Right?
Well, yeah, that was it. That was my first thought.
Yeah, that's my thought.
But in defense of them masking their faces, I imagine that they have legitimate concern that some of these lunatics will come after them. I mean, if
Right.
they're going to protest on the lawns of Supreme Court justices, why wouldn't you be concerned? So, but it's getting more desperate on the left, and they're being exposed as even more stupid. I mean, you could spend all day watching these viral videos. There's one, somebody, not even very well known, is debating some typical white woman liberal
Oh my!
about how she's explaining why communism is such a great system.
Right.
So the guy counters and said, all right, but how do we develop incentive in a system like that? Why should you try harder? So,
I mean, look, it's been done. I think that the Pilgrims tried it when they first landed at Plymouth Rock, right? When they, according to, I actually debated somebody years ago when I was doing the show with Patrick, actually, who was one of the curators of the Plymouth Plantation Museum, now renamed as the Wampatuck Plymouth Plantation.
of course.
Yeah. And he was way out on the left. And I pointed out, I said, look, according to William Bradford's diary, he was governor at the time. He documents how this experiment completely failed, and that when they came, they would have to each work according to his ability, and every person would pool everything equal. There'd be no private ownership, that they would do this collectively, and that within a matter of maybe 6 months to a year, people were starving to death because people were like, hey, why should I do, this guy's sitting around, reading books and sitting in his hut. I'm out here doing all the work. Why should I do all this when we're all sharing it equally? Yeah. There was no incentive, and the whole colony was literally imploding. I mean, people were near starvation. So Bradford came in and he threw it out, and he said he referred to it as a Platonic experiment or something like that. Said this is like it's a bad idea, and he started to create private plots of land. Everyone got their own plot. The people started to grow again, and things returned to normal. This guy who was the curator said, "Oh well, you have to look at the dates." He says it actually is not. He said tried to change the subject. It happened on this date, not on that date, so this is not there. He's like he tried to play a game of 3-card Monte with me, right? Look under this one, but it's over here and it's over there. Anything to take. And I'm like, look, I trust Billy Bradford. He was there. His is his diary.
Well, that's a standard technique of the left.
Yeah,
they'll change the goalposts. When you're talking about X, they'll start talking about Y. And it becomes this endless stupid thing. But going back for a moment to this debate with this communist lady, so she was talking about how it's better to not have money and all the goods are kept in a communal sense. And so the question was, well, how do you reward this guy who's actually working harder? Well, we would keep a voucher. So what do you mean? Well, if this guy actually did more work, he'd get points on his voucher system. And the guy says, you mean like money? He would have more points.
Yes.
No, not money. He'd have money.
They'll use the euphemism. And I mean, I saw actually on the issue of the white nationalist group, Doug Burgum, the head of the Homeland Security, very articulate, really smart guy. He was governor, I think, of North Dakota. Yeah. He was being drilled, I think, by, who is it? She has that chipmunk-like face. I forget her name. This blonde reporter. She hates Trump. Has one of the chief Trump haters. You know who I mean, right? I forget her name. Oh, Dana Bash or Dana something.
Oh, yeah.
Really, really awful. She's like, are you going to condemn this group? Is President Trump going to condemn them? It's the same business they tried to.
Condemn for what?
Well, what his answer was, first of all, I support free speech. They were orderly. They didn't break any laws. Unlike people who are out there, looting businesses. And, well, what about their positions? He goes, well, I don't like the fact that people are out there, taking positions about, anti-Trump kind of stuff, like we want Trump to be impeached and assassinated. And they just want Israel destroyed. And I mean, but they have a right to do it because I support free speech, unlike you. I mean, I don't have, and he said, I don't agree with them, but they have a right to do it. And they weren't violating any laws. Who knows who they are? Anyway, they're trying to make this into the new, so they need to come up with some kind of an equation.
Well, compare this, though, to like 15 years ago. Nobody talked back to the media. But it's all changed now. And Trump was the guy that did that. And they're, kind of running scared because they are now having to engage in a dialogue. And this is, you can draw the analogy to the typical professor in an undergrad level. It's a monologue. He's going to pontificate. Very few kids are going to talk back and say, no, you're really full of crap. That's not how it happened. So I think the whole dynamics are changing. Unfortunately, it's a slow process.
Well, it takes people waking up, becoming red-pilled, as the saying is. Burgum was also on with Steffi Stephanopoulos, who spent the whole segment talking about the reflecting pool, complaining of this so petty. Oh, you're spending too much money. First of all, Burgum brought up the fact that the reflecting pool is a civil rights monument. It's part of the Lincoln Memorial. It's supposed to be a chance for Americans to reflect after the Civil War on all of the issues around that. I mean, since when is the left, in favor of defacing a civil rights monument? And no, it wasn't really defaced. But I mean, there's just these petty things that they're going on about. I suppose we should feel good that they've got nothing serious. And yet, with the midterms coming up, you have these radical communists coming in, and even some of the left wingers, the mainstream left wingers, talking about impeaching Trump, which is exactly what they'll try to do if they win. Stopping him, the Orange Man bad, putting him in prison, having him executed. Who knows? I mean, it's ugly, and they are getting some successes only in really hardcore left districts, like in New York, certain districts in New York where they're not opposed. That bothers me, anyways. Even in
Well, the
Massachusetts.
thing I didn't understand about that, and the analogy is what I always ask you, that if you go to real life Massachusetts, you will meet blue collar type individuals that have jobs, work, support a family, and are not part of this elite. By the same token, if you go to New York City, most people aren't these radical leftist morons. So you ask yourself, who in the hell is voting for Mondani?
I don't know. I mean, and even in Massachusetts, Mayor Wu, she makes the most idiotic statements. I mean, she says, "Oh, the Haitians built Boston." She tells us really. What do you mean they built Boston? They've only been here for a few years. Nothing happened before they arrived. Somehow they built. They built nothing. I mean, look, I'm not saying anything wrong with many of them are good, hardworking people, but this whole rhetoric. I mean, they didn't build anything. And then she's going on about how deporting people is unconstitutional. She's a lawyer. She should know better than that. It's not unconstitutional. It's the prerogative of the Secretary of State and of the President to either grant citizenship or rescind citizenship to anybody they want for any reason. They don't need a reason. That's a prerogative that's always been.
I guess what is coming out, because you say she's a lawyer, how does she not know this? Well, maybe she really doesn't. But I got to tell you that getting a degree doesn't mean a whole lot anymore.
Well, she happens to be a very intelligent woman also. I mean, she's no dummy. She actually, has, done some things that show great depth. So she does know this, and she's lying, basically, when she makes a statement like that and knows she can get away with it in Boston. And I think that she's somehow very popular here. I don't know what it is. She's very engaging. She's easy on the eyes. That accounts for something. She's good with crowds. She remembers to be in right places. She knows how to work. She knows politics. She knows how the retail side of it. Maybe that's it. I don't know. But
I think some of it is people maintain party affiliation apparently to their death. Nothing can change it. I mean, I knew people that were from the so-called greatest generation that were bemoaning the Warren Court crime decisions and affirmative action and whatnot, but they didn't change anything. They're Democrat and that's what they're going to do. So the theory is, I guess, you put up any candidate. That's what they thought. It didn't work for Kamala Harris, maybe because she was so unappealing.
it was so unpleasant, yeah.
But I don't know. There's this, the standards have been lowered so much.
So do you think they're going to take the midterms? I mean, I think that.
Right now, no, I don't, because as I've been saying for so long, Democrats don't have anything. Everything is negative. What positive programs are they coming up with? What have they come up with in the last 10 years?
Doesn't matter. They can still win. Look, they pulled Obama. He was fixing parking tickets in Chicago. It came out of nowhere. All of a sudden, they catapult him into the U.S. Senate after the sitting senator had to resign and go to prison. And 2 years later, he's in the White House. He immediately started running. He was a straw candidate. He was the classic Manchurian candidate. And I don't know. I mean, this guy Plattner in Maine. I mean, he's the worst of the worst. I mean, even liberals are like, he's a abusing women. He's an anti-Semite. He's anti-American. He's just a bad guy all around. And yet he'll probably win. I
Well, why do
mean,
you say that? I mean, what is the appeal of this guy?
because he's a left winger, and he's just Portland is so far left now that the only people that can stand up to him are upstate, and there just aren't enough of them.
How did Portland get that way?
I don't know. I mean, but it's really, you go there and it's these bitter, ashen-faced people. I mean, it's hardcore. You see them. You've probably seen some of these videos where someone is going out and doing a little street interview, right, at the No Kings rally, and they're like, "Wow, what do you have against Trump?" And then you have these women go into like, they're almost like creatures. I mean, it's almost like something inhuman about them. I don't know, and they're dressed like with the weird orange ponytails and piercing and face paint, and they're trying to make themselves look like something other than human. And they're bizarre. The one thing that I mean, their answers and their shrieking. The one thing the only thing I'd say almost that really bugs me that a conservative could never get away with, because they always take on new mannerisms and they introduce them into the culture, is that you have the reporter going up to them and asking them a question, and they just look back with a blank face, like you don't exist. And the reporter, do you want to respond to this? They're like this. Do you want to respond? They're like, and that really gets that really makes me hot under the collar, because if a conservative ever did that, it's like it's a new meme that they're now using, and I think it's probably going to eventually start to happen on television. They haven't done that yet. When a reporter asks something that somebody doesn't want to answer, they'll just sit there like, wasn't there a woman who, after she punched an ICE agent, she's a sitting congresswoman in New Jersey, and the reporter asked her about it, she started singing. Do you remember that? We shall overcome, and she kept going on and on. These are memes that the left introduces, and they become a part of the culture. During the Occupy Wall Street movement, which should have been called Obamavilles, but putting that aside, they introduced this kind of chanting. We want to screw Wall Street. We'll screw Wall Street. We want to do this. We'll do this. And they go back and forth. It's like a sing-song.
Yeah, call and response.
Yeah. Call and response, but it became a part of the dialogue. It became a normal part of the culture. Now,
I mean, I look at it as they just don't have anything. I mean, again, I mean, maybe, you can't hate academia enough. Where this non-response comes from is this idea of a monologue. You have no right to question me.
It's so arrogant and so insufferable. How, that I'm in my own world and you don't exist. You don't have to answer me. I've seen people do this to me in my own personal life in the past, where somebody decides that I don't exist. Like they're not going to acknowledge the most basic element of my humanity. It's like, I'm not in the room. And it's a total thing. That's a meme that maybe the far left has always had, but it's becoming pretty common now, pretty mainstream. They just don't, I'm not going to answer this. I'm done here.
Well, that was, if you ever saw the debate, it wasn't really a debate. It was William F. Buckley was interviewing, of all people, Norman Thomas.
Okay.
And Buckley is always very polite and so on. And it was to say, Thomas, for the full hour, really didn't say a damn thing. Buckley would ask him this or that question about some economic issue, and he would go off onto some rant about whatever. And finally, Buckley ended it. Mr. Thomas, you didn't answer a single question. And maybe that was the idea, that
Right.
if they're not able to go on the attack and pontificate, they've got nothing. And this works, I guess, if you're dealing with kids and college students and the typical idiot. But I think the reason that the people end up being speechless is, imagine being 60 years old and being a true believer in this crap, and someone asks you a question that you can't answer. You have really two alternatives. Either your head's going to explode, you're going to say, hey, you know what? I never thought of it. You're right. I've been an idiot for 60 years, but you're not going to do that. You're just not going to respond.
And you're just going to change the subject or just go blank. In the case of Norman Thomas, I mean, maybe he might have done the interview with William F. Buckley after he had spilled all the beans. I don't know if you know this. It's been published. I should get a copy. Where he said, look, because he was a socialist candidate for president
7 times.
Yeah, I mean, and he was an open socialist. And he said, look, we don't have to win outright as socialists because we're going to take over the Democratic Party and we're going to be in power at some point in the next several decades. We're going to have all of our agenda embraced by the Democratic Party, and it's all going to be implemented. Because he was absolutely right. But I think that by spilling those beans, and he inadvertently, I don't think he meant, he was bragging when he said that. But people were like, oh yeah, well, this is exactly the truth. So maybe it was after that he kind of clammed up. I don't know.
I don't remember the timing, but that's a good point.
Yeah, because I mean, then he sort of, people like, sometimes they do this, right? Everything comes out because they're, having an open moment. They're so confident that they're amongst friends, and they're so, imbibed by their own ideology, and so, as Barney Frank once accused me, besotted by their ideology, he tells me, that they just speak truths. And that's what he was doing. And of course, that is exactly what's happened. He was he was a prophet in that sense. So
well, we'll have to see how much that's embraced. Democrats, are not fighting it. All right.
Do you think that the socialistic thing with these outright communists I mean, it seems like that might have crested at this point. Either that, or are they going to? I mean, I've been saying for a long time, and I've heard Steve Bannon make this point, that the AOC group, the squad, the hard left, they run the Democratic Party now. Everybody basically bows to them. And now that they're getting more foot soldiers in terms of these new people coming in from New York City, this one coming in from Colorado, maybe some others, maybe Plattner. I mean, are they going to really start to take over the whole apparatus? Are they going to really come to power in this country?
I don't think so. I mean, the immediate practical problem for some of the real hardcores is, how do you even take the oath of office? But
how did Obama take the oath of office? I mean, they don't care.
That's a good point. But I think you now have a different environment. All right. Obama got away with it because he was this sort of effeminate, non-threatening, as Jason Whitlock would say, African American. Okay.
Right.
So he was able to pull that off. But remember now, you're in an era where people are talking back, and they're not taking this stuff. I mean, some of the conventional ones still are. All right. But more and more, it's not the case that it's a dialogue. And the people of power don't like the fact that it's a dialogue. And eventually things are falling apart. Look at Paul Pelosi in his, seventh major accident in his life. I truly don't understand this notion that you should drive drunk with all the ride services, with the wealth this guy has. He's just a drunk, arrogant POS, like his drunk wife. All right. So in the old days, this wouldn't have been covered to the extent that it has been. And I think now that people can actually talk back or feel empowered to, this is going to help. And, the mainstream media is dying because they're left wing and they have an agenda and they don't talk back. It's sometimes it's entertaining reading the LA Times that I don't care what the issue is, whether it's the opening of the new restaurant in East LA, they'll find something negative to say about Trump in the article.
Well, and everything involves, not to bring up an analogy, but that's like the way Israel is treated at the UN. It doesn't matter if it's a committee on basket weaving or a committee, they'll somehow blame Israel. They bring Israel into it. They're obsessed with Israel, no matter who they are, what they're doing. Somehow it's the Israelis are doing it. They'll bring that up. It kind of reminds me of Dr. E. Michael Jones. I haven't listened to him in a long time, but I'm sure it's the exact same deal. He could be talking about any topic. You could set a stopwatch to the minute he's going to bring up and blame the Jews for something. No matter what it is, it's nothing to do with the Jews. Everything is an obsession. Everything evolves around it. Well, now it's the same thing as with Trump. Everything evolves, their entire universe, their personal problems are because of Trump. Somehow, I remember this, I'm still upset about this. A relative of mine, I happened to be visiting and she was there on the day that crazy Bernie Sanders supporter opened fire at a baseball game.
Right.
Shooting Congressman Steve Scalise. And everybody was upset. These are left-wingers. And I didn't even have to walk in the room to hear her bring up, well, this is Trump's fault. It's like, really? But that's how they think. Trump is causing an atmosphere that created this. Trump has done this. And I think that, again, I hope and I pray that this kind of thing is going to backfire in terms of even good, reasonably sane liberals who have a few scruples left, a couple of marbles left in their brains, are going to reject this. Especially,
I don't know how many of those exist anymore, because you don't see too many people condemning this AOC segment of the Democratic Party. All right.
Right.
It's a big tent, and we're going to get the votes, and we don't care. And they can even, again, make the analogy to Hollywood. They can even see that it's falling apart, but no one wants to be the kid telling the emperor he has no clothes, right?
Right.
It's all going to somehow occur on its own. It'll be fun to watch. I regret that it takes as long as it did, but I'm convinced now with Hollywood, the only thing that's going to stop this is when they literally run out of money. Not that they lose money, which they've been doing for the last decade at least. There's going to be no more money. All right. Then they can't make this.
They assume that they're going to have an endless supply of money because they've got the Soroses of the world, and they've got Pritzker promoting, sex change for children, and they've got all these other, the wealthiest of the wealthy, financing this stuff and using money pressure. The late David Horowitz did a very good book on foundations and how the top probably 20 foundations, the big money, is all controlled by leftists who are using that money to change the culture and to finance and to punish those who oppose them. And way down the list, like in the hundreds, you have a couple of conservative foundations and a couple occasionally of conservative wealthy people who step forward, but it's way down. It's not the big.
Oh yeah.
There's no comparison. And so I think that the left wingers just think that that's going to continue, and they may be right. They do control the wealth. They do control the top business people. I mean, one of the reasons they despise Elon Musk is because he's one of the few who has at least broken ranks somewhat with this rotten left-wing establishment and amongst the what they used to call the high tech, but it's the social media, in that he actually by buying Twitter, even though it's still censored. I just had to replace my Twitter account. Yeah, it's still going on, but at least there's been a little freedom introduced, because if it had not been for that, I mean, they were really on the road to complete control. And that's where the big money is. So maybe that's what they're assuming, and they may be right. I don't know. Big unions are still quite left-wing, even though their rank and file are not. They still control the money, so they don't feel they have to.
It's going to be a long process, but the odds are not in their favor.
Right.
I think it's peaked. It's going downhill. You refer to trying to blame everything on Israel, and I'm not going to blame everything on academia, but you can blame a lot. But the influence is waning, because where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, the kids don't want the debt, and they see better opportunities elsewhere.
Younger people, I think, are rebelling. They're becoming Christians.
As they always do.
They're becoming conservatives, and they're becoming more and more open about it every day. I mean, that's why they assassinated Charlie Kirk. I mean, but it hasn't really worked. Someone else is going to stand up and go to the plate and take a swing. They can't keep everybody in place forever. Anyway, so Mike, what do you have coming up on the Substack?
Well, I've had a couple of articles came out in the last few weeks. I've got a few things in the hopper. May have something to do with this World Cup situation, where right now the big controversy, of course, is that in the last game, one of the U.S. stars, Logan, was red carded, which by tournament rules means he can't play the next game. Well, the next game is today at 8 o'clock Eastern time in Seattle, and FIFA ruled that he is going to be able to play. And I believe this is because a behind-the-scenes protest was made, because the very infraction that he got red carded for, the same thing was done by Lionel Messi of Argentina, who didn't get a card at all. So I think that point was raised. The fact that the U.S. Is the host country and the only host country that's still in the tournament. But what happened, of course, Belgium, who is the next opponent, filed a protest, of course. So we'll see where that goes.
Plus, I think that Trump might have intervened, right? With the head of FIFA.
But FIFA has had a very sordid history. And if you follow soccer, the amazingly stupid thing about this tournament is that if you want to watch soccer, you watch the club teams, right? Mm-hmm. The actual teams in the major leagues around the world, of which the Premier League in the UK is by far the best. I mean, there's nothing even close.
Right.
So the fact that a given country can field a team ends up being kind of meaningless. And I'll tell you why. Brazil, which is supposed to be this powerhouse, blah, blah, blah. Well, they're out of the tournament. All right. Germany, a so-called powerhouse, out of the tournament. And you're thinking, well, wait a minute. I was always told that the Euro countries have this long tradition. And by the time a kid is 3 months old, he's already playing soccer and he's in these academies. Well, if that's the case, how come they're not winning right now? So
Right.
it's a big upheaval. The fact that the Europeans come over to the U.S. and all these stupid prejudices that they were taught, they're saying, hey, why can't we live this way? Why do we have these incredibly high taxes? So maybe there's a pivot here somewhere, and maybe this should be the next article. But you have Norway now, that was never a strong team, is now in the quarterfinals. So things are changing. The old order just is collapsing, and that's fine.
I noticed that Norway, they don't trust American food. They are bringing all their food with them. They're bringing their salmon and they're bringing everything on ice so that they don't have to have American food. I mean, it's interesting. I don't. They might have a point there. I don't know. They don't want to have seed oil. Anyway, but yeah, it's interesting to see how it all plays out. So we'll watch for it.
Yeah, this is the new time, and I like this. So we start off the week.
Indeed. All right, Mike. Anyways, as always, thanks for joining me.
All right, we will see you next time.
You bet. Thanks a lot. All right, bye-bye.